Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Nick here. Nick, you've been behind a really incredible innovation that's, I think, changed a lot of lives for NFL players and other NCAA players and top athletes in the world. You've created this innovation in the helmet space that's made it much safer for them to play. I mean, we've heard about the kind of injuries that people have had in these sports that have been life-changing injuries, and a better helmet has been a major aspect of the where the improvements are needed to prevent those, and that's what you're doing. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. It's an exciting space, certainly a lot of moving parts. And, football being America's, favorite sport, at least it seems that way from the TV ratings. This is something that needs to be addressed, and people are trying to address it. But even in spite of rule changes, some of the helmet technology that's changing, we're still seeing an increase in some of those injuries. So I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about how we're trying to do that and the sport in general and how other sports can be impacted by this.
Awesome. Sounds good. So just going back to the beginning, like how did your interest in entrepreneurship in the world of business, like how did that passion start?
So when I was in college, I'd come up with some crazy ideas. And, you know, keep in mind, I'm probably two and a half times older than you at 57. There was no internet at the time. Nobody had cell phones. Computers weren't even like Windows wasn't even really a thing until, probably 1989, 1990. So when you came up with an idea, you really had to go to the library, do the research, hire a patent attorney. So the barriers to entrepreneurship were far greater at the time. But I was actually playing D3 football, University of Wisconsin Whitewater. I was a freshman, and I was sitting on the bench along with all the other players. And man, every time I'd sit down, it was metal bench. I'd have these lines on the back of my legs. I'm like, this stinks. So I'd invented some shorts where the back was longer than the front. And that really kind of started my entrepreneurial journey. You'll laugh, but I was working at a place called Merry-Go-Round Enterprises that sold parachute pants. And the buyer there thought, hey, we can build some spirit to corpse by having one of these, low-level employees that schlepping clothes in a mall, bring an idea to fruition. And sold it, promptly went out and spent all the money on a 5.0 Mustang. That started the path of bad financial decisions, but entrepreneurial good choices. At least I like to think.
Mhm. Well, that racing passion is what led to what you're doing now, right? So it was the right path.
That's true. That's true. So I started professional auto racing 95, started amateur auto racing in 92, and did that for about 27 years. I raced in Pirelli World Challenge, primarily a handful of IMSA races. And in that space, you meet a ton of people. We race with IndyCar on non-ovals. So you're traveling around the US. It's like a circus. And I met a guy by the name of Bill Simpson, and Bill Simpson had started Simpson Racing. And he really changed auto racing safety collectively, and motorcycle, snowmobile, different helmets, different seats, three-layer Nomex suits, window nets, etc. And he realized once he sold that company that what he had done there could be applied to other sports where there were even more participants. And certainly in auto racing or in the military, when a piece of equipment fails, it can lead to a fatality. So if you can take that type of mentality and apply it to football or hockey or construction, etc., that's a great path. And that's what he had done. But he really was struggling at the end of his career to crack in the football market because, frankly, there's a lot of politics. And there's one big company that sells 80% of the football helmets. And if you try to sell against a monopoly, like a monopoly does, it's not going to work. And so that's where the opportunity was born. And we ended up buying the assets of that company, which is another story. But it was exciting. And here we are today.
Yeah, I mean, I love to hear that story, like how you guys broke into the space. I mean, it's because it's a very difficult thing, like you mentioned, to get into a space where there's this monopoly. How did it wind up happening that you bought that company?
So fast forward, we start with the Long Beach story. A gentleman by the name of Boris said that was a NASCAR guy and a sports car guy, had been my teammate on a couple of teams, had really taken that discussion and he kept pushing it in front of us, along with a combat controller from the Air Force, Philip Pimp Freeman. And Pimp isn't what you think it is, but that's for a PG-13 version of this podcast. So we ended up having real discussions with Bill, and I went to a couple of friends, and I had a pretty successful marketing business at the time, and I was racing cars. Jimmy Edmonds, Joe Hegner, who was the former CEO of TD Securities Global, one of my good friends, Justin Burt, John Sarkeesian, who had started the company Skills that makes the window or the ladders that you run through in the parachutes, a few Navy SEAL buddies of mine. I wasn't in the military, but I have some friends in that space. And we put some cash together to do an exploratory endeavor that basically said, hey, if we can get proof of concept where we can prove that lighter is better. Bill really espoused to the ideology that when you accelerate an extra 2 pounds on somebody's head in an impact, let's say in 80 Gs, that's an extra 160 pounds, that your cervical structure is managing. And we all watch UFC. I can take a lot of damage if you're just hitting me in the forehead, but once you start snapping my head around or you slam it into the ground with more force, the frequency of injury and the severity of injury increase. So everyone else just kept making heavier helmets because they test better in a lab, where Bill was fighting that trend. So when we started, we knew that it would catch on somewhere, but the NFL really had a lot of barriers. Their test really rewarded heavier helmets, at least in the beginning, and it still does to a point, but they're making improvements. But we found that parents and high schoolers who had kids that were committed to playing not only wanted the benefit from a safety perspective of lighter helmet, advanced materials from racing in the military, but there were performance advantages because you're taking 2 pounds off. Imagine a roster of 73 NCAA players. If you can take 2 pounds off, that's 150 pounds that you're not toting around, in Texas when it's 100 degrees out. So that's kind of how it got started. And then the pandemic hit. And it was probably, I should have been laying on the ground with a bottle of whiskey and a pistol. Like, what are you going to do? You have a company that just gets started. We had 4 or 5 employees that we had to furlough. And the options were either quit, ice it, and then nobody's going to buy from you because they're who's going to buy football helmets if they buy helmets and the company's gone, or we kept feeding it. So we went into austerity mode. We got through the pandemic, and then whammo, we sold everything we could make in 2022. And then we realized we really need to come up with an NFL helmet, a helmet that passes their tests. But in spite of passing their tests and performing as well, if not better than the Riddells and the Schutts and the Vices and the Zeniths of the world, we wanted to make it light because we knew that the lightweight component of this was a huge factor in reducing injury. So we did that. And in fact, right now, our Gladiator and Apache helmets are about 3.5 pounds. We're in the highest category of NFLPA rankings of recommended helmet. And we just got the #1 score at the independent labs of Virginia Tech. And they're like, the foremost expert in testing helmets. It's not even posted up on their site yet. It should be here in the next few days. But I will tell you this, that whether it's equipment managers, whether it's players that say, I only want to wear a helmet that I see on Sunday, that kid doesn't realize that the helmet he's wearing, that costs the high school $300-400 is not the helmet he sees on Sunday. It looks the same, but the internals are different. And there's 2 people that we have to serve. The person wearing the helmet could be 6 years old. They don't buy their own helmet. 16, don't buy their own helmet. And 26, they don't buy their own helmet. They want to know, do I play better? Who else is wearing it? And how does it look? Then the person that's buying it could be a parent, equipment manager, high school, NFL team. They want to know, how much does it cost? Is it safer? And is it sustainable? Meaning, can I get it refurbished and maintain it, et cetera? So it's a super complicated business, far worse than I would have guessed. If you asked me if I would do this again, I would probably lie and say yes. Absolutely not. But we're here, and now we're on a mission because we see the impact. We have a high school here in San Diego, Mar Vista High School. They switched from a competitive helmet, actually Riddell helmets, over to ours. They went from 17 concussions down to 4. And 2 of those concussions were kids that insisted on wearing the old helmet. So to go from 17 to 2 is not a rounding error. So we know we're on the right path. And now we have Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, as an investor, Tony Romo, Drew Stanton, Tyrod Taylor, other owners that have equity in the company like Cam Jordan, Darius Robinson. It's really starting to take some motion, but it's a lot of work.
So what goes into like designing the helmet differently to, get this concussion amount much lower? Like, what do you do different and how do you make it so light?
So, I will start with the competitive helmets, right? You have to deal with styling, the general size, et cetera, because you have to be within the zip code to start with those parameters. So working within, let's say, a shape or a size, you have to have the styling, it has to be ventilated, et cetera. But then we start to set parameters on it. We're not constrained like the big companies to, hey, we're going to make our shells in China or in Vietnam with, polycarbonate plastic shells. almost all of our components, and by the end of Q1, all of our components will be North American made. The goal is to have a US made football helmets for a variety of reasons. But we start with this with what do you want it to look like, and we have somebody sketch it out and design it. But then the real meat and potatoes is what makes it safer. And we will say, hey, we want it to weigh under 3.5 pounds. It's got to be within a certain size parameter. A 6-year-old kid that's just starting to play Pop Warner is not running 23 miles an hour like a Tariq Hill. The only time he's going or she's going 23 miles an hour is in the SUV on the way to the game. So that helmet has a different diameter squishiness of the internals on the helmet. The weight has to be different. The level of compression has to be different. The size has to be different. So we design different helmets for different levels of play. Then there are tests associated with those. And then there are temperature conditions, et cetera. So one of the things that we did was the NFL had funded this technology from a partner called Clyde. And this is a 3D printed component made of TPU. The inside of this helmet there's no tooling for it. It's all 3D printed. And the beauty of that is you can make subtle changes to this without having to go through the exercise of retooling. So we can build the internals and we can put it in a shell. We can go and test it. And then we test it in LS Dyna, which is an impact simulator. And you can really drill down on what do you need for the NFL and NCAA D1, because you got big guys moving at high speed. Then high school that maybe can't afford the same level helmet as the NFL, but they're not moving as quick either. And the guys are close to as big, but not quite as big. And then you have, big youth and then small youth. So we design for each one of those. We test for those. Then we go through the formal testing process. The NFL has Virginia Tech. There's an organization called NOXI that now requires every youth helmet to be under 3.5 pounds. They're yet to implement it, but it's in the process of being implemented. So you're managing all of these environmental effects. Plus, you see, the new face masks are getting to be wild with all of these crazy bars. You have to keep up with that because the styling's important. So does the Oakley visor fit in it? Got to make that happen. Which chin strap are you going to use? Are you going to do it yourself or somewhere else? Where are you going to build this stuff? What are the costs of it? So maintaining a number one position in safety and performance is always our number one issue. Got to look great. Number two. Number three, it's got to, you got to build something that can be purchased by people where the demand is. We know football's growing again, 5.65 million players playing tackle, and we have a flag football headgear. There's 7 million flag players, but you got to build something that people want and that they can afford.
So, I mean, you mentioned like you have a couple different markets, Nick, that you're in. I mean, the NFL market was one of the more difficult ones to get into compared to, some of the other sporting areas. How different has the helmet had to be designed for the NFL? Is it really the same type of product? And what are some of like your favorite stories of it being helping people out in the NFL or just helping people in general? Because I'm sure you mentioned the amount of concussion reductions. I'm sure there's some great ways it's been helpful there.
Yeah, the NFL implemented some testing in 2017, and it's really a living test that's changed over time. And so you have this test, but then you also see the rule changes, right? 2022 NFL concussions were actually up 18%. Last year, they were up 4 to 5%. This year, they're running ahead of where they were. Why is that with the rule changes in the helmet tech? Well, we feel that the NFL's done a great job of trying to simulate what happens on the field in a lab. But that's not really what happens on the field. It's close. So we know we need to ace that test, which we have. But we also know that this weight component is huge and going on field. So one of the things that we did is it was probably 2-3 years ago. There was a quarterback at Utah, Cam Rising. He's in the Rose Bowl, playing Ohio State, 38-38. He's wearing the quote unquote number one, rated helmet on the NFL test. He gets pushed back while he's getting dragged down. Not a big hit, concussed out of the game. I'm at the game. I'm like, I'm getting a helmet on that kid. Fast forward, someone from, I post that on LinkedIn. Someone I know from racing says, I know the kid's dad. Rising's dad calls me. We get to be friends on the phone, and I'm explaining to him why he's like, I can't understand. This is supposedly the best helmet money can buy that we have on Cam. I'm like, gosh, it weighs almost 6 pounds. Our helmet was closer to 3. Let's get him in here and try it. So Cam came in with his girlfriend. Then we went to the University of Utah because they had some desire to wear it. They said, absolutely not. It's got to be on the NFL list. And we weren't on the NFL list yet, like we are now. So we had to go in there. We talked to assistant athletic director, the equipment people, the medical staff, training staff. It was unbelievable, but the kid wears it. He goes through, now he's had a couple of other injuries, but he gets targeted 6 or 7 times in the following year, no injury whatsoever. He actually decides to invest a few bucks in the company, as do his parents. But then we got other guys on the team to wear it. Then other colleges started to wear it. And when you show people the video of the hits that he took where he wasn't injured, even though it's anecdotal, versus when he was injured, it really impacts people because if you've played the game, one of the first people that we talked to, Rick Meyer, lives locally, said my worst head injury was when I got sacked and my head slammed back into the turf. And when that extra weight, if you put your hand down and you hit one or drop a construction hammer that weighs 6 pounds versus 3, where do you think that energy goes? That earth doesn't move, right? That energy gets pumped into your head. So we've seen reduction in concussions at a high school level. Now it's anecdotal, like our school, Mar Vista High School, but the science is behind us in that there are multiple studies that show that helmet weight adds to the frequency and severity of concussion. So we've got that component. We have the fact that we're up at the tip of the spear at Virginia Tech, that we're in the highest category at the NFL. But the other thing we did is we went out and we found a dozen doctors, the head of neurology at Baptist Health, Peter Cummins that worked for TB12, which is Brady's old company, Tal David, who's a Chargers orthopedic physician. The list goes on. They helped us design this stuff. They all cater to athletes in this space, so they know what weight causes. No helmet can eliminate concussion in any of these sports, whether it's hockey, lacrosse, rugby, football, or even commercial, an application like construction. But you can reduce weight. And we know that every motocross rider, every Formula One driver, every Navy SEAL or combat controller or Delta Force guy, they don't want a heavy helmet. You want a lighter helmet. And it's not only for performance, but it's for safety. So, the guys we have wearing this in the NFL now, a couple examples would be Cam Jordan, Tyrod, Darius Robinson, Ben Barch. The Quisenberry brothers have been in them and out of them. We got a variety of other guys. We're not seeing the propensity of injury there. Now, everybody's got their opinion and they have the choice of picking helmets, but we're seeing a bigger uptake. And now the big high schools are coming to us because if you think about what happens, if you're the quarterback and you're the starter, big high school, big college, NFL team, and you go down, that everything changes. Everybody loses. The athlete's hurt, impacts his future, impacts his compensation. The agent's hurt. The team doesn't play as well. The TV ratings go down. The list goes on, right? So we're in a place, but we're fighting the big, 2,500-pound gorilla in the room, which is the monopoly that's been kind of running this industry for a long time. And we're having to do business a little bit different, but we feel we really can make a difference on the safety side.
Mm-hmm. So Nick, you've also taken battlefield technology, F1 technology. We talked a little bit about racing stuff before, and you've implemented that here. Like, what has kind of been the most outside the box stuff you've put into this that, other helmet makers just aren't doing that? Like, how have you taken stuff from the battlefield and put that into the helmets?
It's a great question. So there's 3 things that come to mind. One is our youth composite helmet is made of an aramid, which is a tri-weave, or what industry people call Kevlar. That's a specific commercial name. I think it's DuPont. But that shell that we make, the tri-weave shell, as opposed to a plastic shell, spreads impact out differently. The modern era combat helmet is made out of the same material. The internals, expanded polypropylene, it's a foam. It looks like styrofoam. It's not. It's a foam that recovers quickly. The inside of combat helmets are made of that material or expanded polystyrene, which is very similar. And again, that comes from the battlefield. From the auto race track, the face masks that we're using, the majority of them are chromoly tubing. So it's like an auto race roll cage, but it's down at a much smaller scale. They look cool, but they're significantly lighter. And of course, we use titanium as well in the higher levels of play. But applying all of those technologies and then refining them, and we learn as we go. one of the things about being a small company is we can make changes or add things fairly quickly where other companies can. And, we outsource all of our component manufacturing, but we do all the assembly here internally. And we plan to do that in hockey and construction, lacrosse, and also military. And ironically, the granddaughter of the founder of Riddell football helmets, Jennifer Tate, had reached out to us and said, "Hey, I've got some technology that I've accumulated over time. She's no longer involved with Riddell. Would you like to partner on this and commercializing it? Because it's tough to get helmets on field." So we're working through some of those details now with her technology and a lot of the big universities that bring us inventions. And in fact, one of our doctors, Michael McDermott, who's a neurologist out of Florida, brought us a surf helmet that we're working on. In fact, that was a project I was working on today.
It's very cool. Yeah, I mean, I just love how you've taken stuff that works in other places and that's light and then adapted it differently, which I think is really innovative and different. Just the last question I have, what do you aspire to do now? Like, what are some of your short-term goals, your long-term goals to really grow this and to help a lot of people out with a better helmet?
Well, one of the primary things is to scale this. Now that we've proven that we can commercialize technology that we've developed that's at the tip of the spear, we have to get the company funded to the point where we can go out and really scale and roll the throttle on because like our first big dealer order this year was over 1,000 helmets. We hadn't sold 1,000 helmets through dealers, in the past year. Now we sold a lot more helmets than that, but we're doing it direct to consumer. So now that we're ready to grow, we've got to add fuel to fly the jet. That's number one. But number two really is I feel that we can contest to be, compete with the number one football helmet company, the number one hockey helmet company. And then we'd like to break into some of these ancillary markets like construction. OSHA, right, which regulates all of this, now is requiring their employees to wear a Type 2 construction helmet. Now imagine somebody wearing a helmet that looks similar to a combat helmet, but it's made out of the materials, that for a construction site, right? We're not trying to stop bullets at while we're building a house, but you could get your potential livery of Dallas Cowboys, Alabama Crimson Tide, etc. But it's got the utility, protection, comfort, and weighting of a helmet that somebody that wears $50 million or makes $50 million is wearing, because that's where the R&D is done on the football field. So expanding into those other areas. And then, of course, we're building a lot of IP and collecting IP, which we can license. And then third, and this is a little bit over on the peripheral, is we have all of these great athletes that are creative young people, male, female, in all these different sports. Some are owners, some wear our product, etc. One thing that we find is no matter what locker room you go into, whether it's a bunch of youth players or at the NFL level, you have smart, polite, goal-oriented, organized, motivated people. We need to scale and expand that and show, other than when they're on the field, what these people are like. So we have a brand that we're building called Man in the Arena, and man and woman in the arena, which is if you go out and you play on a Friday night, if you play on a Saturday during the day in youth or college or the NFL, everyone sees you succeed or fail. And all of us in life have to deal with these things. And we want to take that philosophy and have these great athletes be able to create their own clothing lines and be able to sell them in very limited numbers. So a highline stuff where it kind of becomes infectious and the brand becomes infectious, and we're not just a helmet company, although that's the focus. So that's really the direction we're heading in. Is this something that's going to become a publicly traded company? Who knows? Don't know that. Does somebody come in and want to buy this thing? I will say that we do have a tech component in that now in our bumper, in our helmet bumper, we're able to put a 4K camera, and it's very small and it fits in. It'll be available in Q1 of 2025. So for the NFL, will they use that for broadcast? It's possible. But certainly they'll be using it in practice. But imagine every kid that's on huddle, every kid that plays Pop Warner football or high school football, instead of their mom or dad or friends saying, "Why did you throw that interception in the flat?" Now they'll actually be able to see in stabilized image version exactly what the player saw. It only weighs a few ounces. It fits in the helmet. We're going through the approval process, but what a cool tool for coaches and for players to be able to share with others that maybe that are not capable of getting on field, of what it's really like, the violence and the speed and the decision making of what somebody goes through on the field. So that's an exciting component as well. And having that content really has some value too.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's pretty interesting and exciting. Well, I look forward to seeing what you're going to do next, Nick, and how you're going to really scale this out. I think you've got something really great here that's been very helpful already to a lot of people, and it has pushed this space forward. It's been a very similar space for a long time, and you're doing something different. And I'm excited to see where you take it and wish you much success. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Ben. Guys like you that can see this, that there's a difference between traditionally what's been out there and things not changing, and not only the safety change, but gosh, there's so many opportunities for this thing to be a platform, and whether it's for camera, whether it's for communication, or communicating your individuality based on how your helmet looks. All those things are important, but the big thing is safety, and we feel that football is part of the solution. For kids collectively, get out in front of your screen, put your phone down, and go out and play. And if this allows parents to feel a little bit more comfortable with their son or daughter going out and playing flag football, soccer, football, any of the sports we cater to, we've been successful. So thanks for having me on today.